Welcome back to Boo You Horror, a horror podcast that evaluates horror movies through the lens of a licensed professional counselor. For today's episode, I am going to be discussing a newly released Blumhouse film, Speak No Evil, just releasing earlier in 2024, which I guess makes it not that new, but new enough. I will fully admit bias in my feelings towards the film, if only because it is incredibly rare for Blumhouse to do me wrong, and this company has produced some of my favorite movies. And this movie personally did not disappoint. With a runtime of 1 hour and 50 minutes, this movie is a remake of a 2022 Danish film of the same name, only the endings are apparently vastly different, which makes me want to watch the original considering so many fantastic movies come from other cultures. But this story is about a family that goes on vacation to Italy, and while there, they befriend another family. The befriended family, with James McAvoy as the patriarch, Patty, invites said family to their home in, I think it's England, Scotland, somewhere in the United Kingdom. It seems like a typical family retreat until things start to be noticed, especially in the treatment of James McAvoy towards his son, Ant. Ant, as far as we know, is mute, though we don't know the full reason until later in the film. It is clear that the main characters, Ben and Louise, do not approve of the behavior towards Ant, but they also do nothing to stop it. The only one who speaks out on being uncomfortable is Ben and Louise's daughter, Agnes. Later in the film, Ant is able to draw Agnes away from the two families in order to show her something that had been kept secret. James McAvoy's character Patty and his wife Sierra have been inviting families like this over for years, and intentionally mistreating children in front of the invited family. In fact, Ant's family was in a very similar situation to Agnes's, and both his parents were killed while they proceeded to cut out Ant's tongue. The real reason he cannot speak, rather than him being mute, and hence the title of the film, Speak No Evil. From a psychological perspective, I feel there are two very large themes at hand here. It appears that it has a lot to do with overall passivity and not rocking the boat, but it has to do with classism as well as the development of how people present the best versions of themselves to others. When I first started writing the script, I had the perfect language for it, but I'll be honest, it's been a few weeks now due to being in recovery, so you'll have to bear with me. At first, it really does appear that Ben and Louise are not speaking up simply because they believe it's rude to do so. This is not their home, this is not their family, and people just do things differently than them. There are a few moments where Louise does try to say something and is immediately chastised, leading her to back down rather than continue to fight and speak up against the treatment of art. It's important. From a faraway glance, one could say that Patty struggles with narcissistic personality disorder. He doesn't believe that he is the problem at all, and feels completely justified in his actions throughout the film. He appears to be an incredibly successful man, and the cracks that we see slipping through only appear to come when his own ego is challenged. While this could be the case, it is hard to completely determine or diagnose, simply because so much of Patty's life is a lie. While he introduces himself as a doctor, he later slips and reveals that he isn't one, leading Ben and Louise to successfully catch him in a lie. A lot of his narcissistic traits are purely manipulation traits, and while this is also true of narcissism as a whole, you would not be able to diagnose without knowing Patty's absolute truth. So the fact that it is covered up, the fact that his personality as a whole is an entire act, means that by default it would not be diagnosable. It should also be noted that people are throwing the word narcissism around rather loosely lately, and are comparing it to anyone who appears to have an ego or cocky attitude, or sometimes it even just gets used for someone that another person doesn't like. The actual diagnosis aligns with the pattern of grandiosity. This seems to really hit the mark because Patty attempts to come off as the successful, rich individual who does things via grand gestures. An excessive need for admiration, which is hit or miss in Patty's sake, and a lack of empathy, which naturally seems like this is a given if someone is murdering families and kidnapping their children. There's also an overall sense of entitlement. He is entitled to commit these crimes because he feels these families deserve it. However, again, due to the manipulative nature of the character, it is hard to know if he fully aligns with these qualities, or even that is part of his role. This reminds me of when people ask me to diagnose Donald Trump, and if I would call him a narcissist. By technical standards, a therapist is unfit to diagnose someone until there have been several sessions, so we unfortunately cannot take individuals at face value just because they seem to check certain boxes. What we do know is that Patty has been doing this for some time, including to his wife, Sierra, who was one of the first children that he took from her family and later married. Super gross. Sierra is no victim though, and while at first there was this desire to feel sorry for her, feeling that perhaps she was just going along with it in order to protect herself, which would be entirely understandable in this situation, it is later demonstrated that she will do anything to help Patty. One could say that she has developed Stockholm Syndrome, genuinely falling in love with the man that tore her from her family and thrust her into this life. But there are also several opportunities for her to go against Patty and recognize the wrongs with solid backup and support. Victims of Stockholm Syndrome, while they do typically fall in love with their captor, often do not get to the point where their morals are tossed aside, especially when it comes to killing parents and cutting out the tongues of children. I'm just saying. But the thing that truly strikes me the most about this film, which doesn't have quite the therapeutic term, is the desire to save face. As previously mentioned, both Luis and Ben don't really do anything to interfere with the negative treatment they see. Luis does speak up privately to Ben several times about being uncomfortable, but in true horror movie fashion, the husband tends to not believe what is happening until it is almost too late. He brushes her off, they fight a lot, talk about potential divorce. It is clear that their image is much more important to them than anything else, even standing up and protecting someone with no voice, literally, from genuine harm. The part of the movie that I truly enjoy the best is when Ben is asking Patty why he is doing this to their family, and Patty simply responds, "Because you let us." This is a powerful line because it shows how humanity as a whole tends to let people get away with things over and over and over. For what? The sake of being polite, perhaps? The potential to look like the good guys? This latter is what Patty focuses on. They are so intent on coming off as the good guys, as the individuals that can do no wrong, that this is their downfall. If they had spoken up more against Art's treatment, would Patty have chosen to target the family still? Perhaps. But it does seem like it's a common thread that he will kill the families that don't speak up for the underdogs, that would rather sit around in their ivory towers eating caviar and living this perfect lifestyle, coming off as the martyrs who do good. Unfortunately, we do not have absolute proof of this, as we do not know or even get flashbacks to any of the other families, but this specific line, "Because you let us," comes with heavy implications. In a way, it makes you empathize with what Patty is getting at, if only he didn't go about doing it in such a sadistic manner. It's a nod to a lot of what is happening in our current world, in which so many people feel that they do not have voices, and those that are in positions of power simply refuse to speak up. In a way, Luis and Ben are the narcissists driven by ego. Their image is so much more important than helping someone that is hurting, and at the end of the film, the only characters you can truly feel you are rooting for are the kids Agnes and Art. Ben and Luis are actually awful people, and that's kind of the point of the film. Speak no evil is a play on words here, it seems. Art can literally speak no evil due to having his tongue cut out, but the family does not dare to speak ill of how the other family parents, treats each other, their outrageous behavior, etc. Their silence is more powerful than the silence of the kid who quite literally has had his tongue cut out, because theirs is chosen silence. It's sort of like the bystander effect, in which individuals will not speak up or hop in to save a situation due to simply believing that someone else will step in and take over, so why should they get involved? Luis and Ben didn't get involved, which is why Patty says, "Because you let us." Luis and Ben let themselves be walked all over. They let Patty treat his son poorly. They didn't even consider really bringing any issues up, and therefore they were allowed to be targeted. The bystander effect normally applies to a larger scale issue where there are several people witnessing a scenario that could speak up, but the idea still stands. No one wants to take responsibility because they would rather protect themselves in this film. And while self-preservation is not an evil trait by any means, this movie shows the destruction that comes when people would rather put themselves first than speak up against evil. Hence, speak no evil. I mention classism because this is something we see on the daily within our government. I can compare this to the ongoing case of Luigi Mangione. Individuals see corporate greed and will often stay silent as they feel there is nothing they can do about it. It allows people to get away with things that harm others. Luigi would be the opposite of Luis and Ben in this film, and while I certainly don't condone killing others and putting that out there on the internet, the point is that he took a stand in the face of evil, even to the point of putting himself in danger. This is what the film stands for. It is not simply a narcissist as we may feel at first, getting away with things because he has a sense of grandiose pride that he is capable of getting away with whatever he wants. It's about a man trying to make an incredibly twisted point that bad things wouldn't happen if people would simply speak up. It's like an episode of What Would You Do if John Quinones then decided to murder everyone that didn't step in and help the actors in the varying scenarios. I will say, don't do this at home, kids, but there's a difference of standing up when safety is threatened or not. Ben and Luis didn't know that Patty and Sarah were murderers who had kidnapped Art. They did not know that there was a threat if they were to stand up for his mistreatment, or if Luis had reiterated that she was a vegetarian rather than tryingly offered goose just because she wanted to be polite, or any of these things that happened in the film. The only thing that would have been damaged if they had stood up and spoken out, as far as they knew at the time, was their ego. It's about putting our ego aside, about recognizing that it's okay to have people upset with us, and be less than this image of consistent kindness, and standing up against injustice. Rather than speak no evil, it's speak against evil. In therapy, one of the tools that gets brought up in DBT is distracting ourselves by doing for others to build up distress tolerance. At the end of this, I hope you think about one thing you can do for someone else today, and tomorrow, and every day until that. Because while humanity can be terrifying, humanity is also all we have. As a movie itself, I would rate it a solid 8 out of 10. Had a slow start, but it was something I found enjoyable that I would watch again and would probably develop more of an opinion on during my second go-through. It did admittedly feel a lot longer than the hour and 50-minute runtime, as a lot of the action doesn't pick up until more than halfway through the film. In terms of mental health exploration, specifically the bystander effect and the portrayal of classism bias, I'd give it a 6. If you'd like to do more research yourself on the phenomenon known as the bystander effect, I cannot recommend enough what is considered the ultimate book on this subject, The Bystander Effect, The Psychology of Courage and Inaction by Catherine Sanderson. That's it for me, and until next time, apparitions.